Hey, this is Devin Coldewey with TechCrunch, and I'm here with Ren Ng from Lytro. And we're on a beautiful day here in San Francisco down at the Ferry Building. And we've got a bunch of people testing out the Lytro. I actually have one that I'm reviewing right here in my pocket. And there it is. Hey.
I've got one too.
Cheers. This is the CEO and essentially the originator of the technology who we have here. So we're going to ask him a few questions about the technology here. So I'm curious, like right now you have just launched an actual device. You've got the hardware and everything you're shipping. Like what comes next? I mean, obviously you're dealing with the product lifestyle, but the product life cycle, but what happens next?
Today we're very much focused on launching the camera itself and getting it out into as wide distribution as possible. And then we're really focused on the software experience for what's going to come next for each generation of the software that's tied off the same device. I think that's really exciting because every file that's shot with this camera stores a raw light field that has a lot of information inside that you can do a lot of things with. For example, you can focus out to the fact, and that's what people are seeing from day one, but you can also make 3D shots from this. So every shot's inherently 3D. And you can do something else that we call parallax, where you can actually shift the viewpoint in the scene. And all of those will come with software advancements as some of the exampls that we're working on.
Yeah, that's the impression that I got when I was talking with some of the rest of the team when we were going over the software and on the web. There's so much potential for all this information, and right now it's mainly about this shifting of focus and adjusting the the composition and stuff like that, and it's really cool. But I'm so excited about the next phases and doing like adjusting the exposure and doing the 3D stuff and all the other. So like, is there a timeline on rolling these things out, or like what's the next feature that you feel like people are going to want? Like when they get this in their hands and they try out and they see that what it's capable of, what's next? So what's the next thing that they want that you want to give them?
Well, I think the folks that are getting it from day one will really be focused on how they can take more creative kind of photography and sharing those through the web in a way that's exciting to them and to the friends and family that I know many of them want to impress. We're hearing from a lot of those customers right now. So I think that at the beginning point, a lot of those folks are going to be most interested in how can I figure out how to capture from the light field the kind of pictures that look like on Lytro.com, these things that can tell a new kind of story interactively, and we're really focused on a lot of the tools to help people understand and get that out too.
We just scoot over here to avoid the wind noise. So I'm curious, obviously you're focused on launching this right now. I've asked about the capabilities about like video and licensing it and like putting it elsewhere. Like obviously this device is mostly lens. It's mostly the mechanism of the lens and some of the storage stuff. But if you obviously you want to have a nice lens, but could you put it in a camera phone or a much smaller body or a larger body with a larger sensor and stuff?
The technology is completely compatible with things as small as smartphones through to things with larger sensors and larger lenses for even higher end photography. The thing that I was really excited to get into this first product is that with a lens like this, where there's such a large zoom range, from about 36 to almost 300 millimeter equivalent, and with f2 across the whole range, which is unprecedented today, as a photographer, and I'm a very passionate photographer, that's how I got into this whole line of research. As a photographer, I'm really excited about how much creative dimension that gives to every photographer. Because you can shoot from wide angle, things that are very close, even like a bee filling a frame full, to at the long end, you can shoot in a restaurant, your friends at many tables away, you can get a tight crop to capture just the perfect expression on their faces. Yeah. So it's a really terrific photographic device.
Speaking, like just as a camera, it's the lens is really kind of astonishing. Like this, an f2, photographers watching this will understand when I say an 8x zoom, which is around like 40 to 300 or so. With a constant f2 aperture is just it's a monster that on a Canon lens or something like that, it would be like that's big glass.
Yeah, a lot of the pictures that I took at earlier stages with other prototypes were built on larger sensors just for prototyping, and they required a bag of lenses. All of the shots that I'd taken at any point in our research phase have been collapsed down into something that now fits in your pocket, and that an everyday consumer can now shoot with that kind of creativity. So I think that's one of the things I'm most excited about in this product.
Are you looking at launching this anywhere other than selling it on your website? I mean, I was trying to explain to a friend how it works, and I didn't have it handy, but if somebody was walking through a Best Buy or something like that, and somebody said, oh, here's how it works, boom, you can show it. So, like, is it difficult to launch without a sort of retail partner to show people in real life or on the street?
That's one of the reasons for a lot of these photo walks that we're doing with a lot of our initial customers and other folks that have been interested, is to really get people a chance to be hands-on with the device, because you're right now it's sold on Lytro.com only at the beginning. Over time we'll be moving it into other distribution, but at this beginning point we have such a large number of customers that have ordered already through Lytro.com. We're focused more on just getting the supply chain up.
How about getting into Windows?
Windows is definitely in the works and be out later in the year.
It's lucky I have a Mac. The software is only for Mac right now, but it's coming out for Windows. Well, I don't want to take up any more of your time. There's many more things to take pictures of, living pictures of, and so thanks for talking with us. Ren Ng from Lytro.
Terrific. Thanks very much.
Hey, and we're here with Eric Cheng from Lytro. He's the director of photography, so I think that you probably were out taking pictures with this thing before anybody else in the world was, right?
I was, yeah, absolutely. So we've been shooting the prototypes, various versions of the prototypes for some time now.
And you had it kind of hacked together to look like a homemade camera or something. Is that right?
Yeah, in the beginning we weren't so worried because we just had a bunch of boards, so we would carry a board and a computer that was tethered to it. And people thought we were just doing some kind of science experiment. But yeah, we had it masked in a couple different ways. One was actually a stuffed shark, and so I would stick my hand inside the stuffed shark, and that was a really good one. But we had various versions of masks so that we could shoot in the wild before it was ready.
So you're a photographer. I'm a photographer as well, and I'm interested in this because it makes me think about like the composition of my photos differently. You've been shooting with it for longer than most people, and has it changed the way that you think about your pictures? Has it affected your like traditional photography or anything?
It has. When I'm framing pictures now, I'm constantly thinking more like a stereographer. Really, I'm thinking in terms of depth. And I used to think in terms of depth, but in terms of depth of field in a flat picture. But now I'm thinking of depth much differently because of the potential to tell stories using objects at different depths in a particular composition. And so I would say it's carried over into my thinking even as a traditional photographer. But I haven't seen how it's affected those 2D pictures yet. It's mostly that I feel like refocusing things all the time because I'm constantly in this world.
Yeah. Have you had to get adjusted to the square aspect ratio? I know it's been a sort of a struggle for me just in the last few days.
Well, it's funny. I'm on Instagram a lot, and so I end up thinking in terms of that square aspect ratio. But before I thought of it, I sort of associated it with rapid sharing. Because all of my square pictures were taken so that I could share them immediately. But it did help me get used to that square format. And so it hasn't been as confusing, I've been able to hop back and forth pretty easily.
One of the features that I am a little frustrated that we don't have at launch is in the editing app. I know this is coming. Is being able to adjust color and exposure and stuff like that after the fact, because it's like it's kind of like you've added this great ability to add to adjust focus after the fact and to change the sort of subject of the camera, but we can't change the you can't crop it or change the saturation or the bump up the shadows a little bit because it exposed a little low or something like that. Is this coming fast? Have you played with it? Does it work?
So I can't answer that question, but I can say that it is coming. We are working on editing, but specifically we're working on editing in the light field domain, in addition to these traditional things that you've been talking about, like exposure and cropping. There are a lot of things that we can do that people haven't seen before because we have all of this light field information, which has information about depth, as we've seen. So you can imagine potentially that we could do tilt shift, but optical tilt shift, not just blurring the top and bottom. So a lot of the editing or filters that we'll be doing, whatever we decide to do, will take the full light field into account.
Are there any cool sort of unique Lytro-esque effects that you've been playing around with that you can tell us about that like maybe aren't possible on a normal camera?
Yeah. So a lot of them are initial experiments because there are a lot of things that are theoretically possible. But of course, they have to be prototyped before we can make them available to the public. So there are things like being able to control the aperture. So if you can imagine having a different look for the different types of blur in a picture. You know, you can imagine being able to tune the bokeh or something like that.
Right. Yeah, we talked about that in the little web meeting and stuff. That sounded very interesting.
It is very interesting, and what's really exciting is no one has ever seen these effects before. So as we're prototyping them, we're seeing them for the first times ourselves as well.
Yeah, and so I know stuff like having the whole scene in focus, or just part of it in focus, or maybe having like, you know, you and these guys behind us in focus, but not anything in the foreground or in between. Like, there's a lot of options, and I'm really excited for those options to appear, which is why I'm impatient to get those updates rolled out. So I know you can't give us a timeline, but you know, is it soon? Is it kind of soon?
Well, what I can say is that all in focus will be the first thing that we're going to roll out.
Okay.
And the other thing that we're working on publicly is the ability to shift the perspective as a viewer. So you can kind of wiggle your head around and look behind objects a little bit. And that's very much tied to 3D stereo display. So we're going to unlock all in focus and then these perspective shifts and 3D.
You think would it even be possible to like set up two of these in stereoscopy? Is that even like is that just crazy? I don't even know if that would even work.
So it would work. You could do it. I mean, we have 3D information from even a single exposure with the single camera.
But I don't know well, I'm not going to get into all the technicalities of after.
Yeah, so I think there are going to be some people doing very interesting things with multiple cameras going down the road, and I'm not sure what it means. I mean, it could mean a lot of different things. You know, it could mean that you get really, really accurate depth maps, you know, behind your scene. We've had people ask for 40 cameras to line up. If we had 40 cameras, we may not give it to them. We may give it to other people. But you know, this idea of having bullet time in the light field domain. I mean, each one of these cameras is effectively a bullet time camera already. But if you had lots of them, you know, I'm sure there are lots of interesting things you could do.
Considering how much processing power is in this right now for taking that picture and absorbing that information and storing it, how much more would we need to do like a Lytro video? You know, how much more bandwidth or CPU or whatever? Is it possible right now, or would it have to be 10 of these stacked together, or is it unimaginable, or is it like just around the corner?
So I would say it's definitely not unimaginable. We can imagine this very, very easily, right?
I just did, right now.
I know. You're a visionary.
Oh man, I had to start my own company. Lytro Video, but it has nothing to do with Lytro Normal. That's just a coincidence.
Yeah, so I mean, I think what we're waiting for is the ability to capture light field images, light field pictures at a video speed, and that's really the only thing that's missing. That plus the computation power required to then process every frame. So we've of course done prototypes with time lapse. You know, you can take a picture a second with this thing, so you just take a bunch of those and string them together, and you have a light field movie. But it's been really exciting to play in that domain because focus pulls and having everything in focus, these are all just variables after the fact, and so it really unlocks a lot for people looking to do creative things.
Oh, I think so too. Well, that's pretty much all I've got for you. Eric Chang from Lytro.